I killed any of his bills coming over from the Senate. So I always find out it makes a difference when they introduce my resume a little bit. My wife and I founded Ozark Awards in 1980, grew it into a company that, and if you think about it, it was the American dream. We started on the porch in our house that we rented. The back porch was the manufacturing area, the kitchen was the engraving area, and the living room was the packaging area. So we grew that company, and I sold it 2 years ago. Had 6 employees and had customers in 48 states. So it's an American dream of being able to start a company, and I sold it because I started another company a few years ago called Ozark Wings, which is a hunting preserve. We do commercial raise quail, pheasant, and have a 800-acre hunting preserve where people come in and enjoy the outdoors. If you're ever interested, it's ozarkwings.net. So as an entrepreneur, you're always trying to further your business interest. But thank you very much. And the other day, someone asked me about my kids, and when I first started getting into political office, they were 3, 6, and 10. They're now 24, 21, and 19. So time has flown, but it's been great. But thank you very much for the introduction. You know, I always tell this that I have a lot of school groups that come up, and I was able to serve 8 years in the Missouri House, and was one of the blessed times to spend my last 2 years in the majority party, working 6 years in a minority party. We were able to finally take over the majority, and it's great being able to drive policy rather than sitting back and playing defense all the time. But a school group, I was talking to them one time, and since I went over to the Senate that we used to call the Cave of the Winds, I asked the school group, I said, what did you think of the house? And they said, well, the house is like a kindergarten class. And I thought that was kind of funny because it matched with, you know, those noisy and things running around. And I puffed up a little bit and I said, well, what do you think of the Senate? And they said, well, it's kind of like a nursing home. So that kind of keeps it into perspective. But thank you, and it's been great 6 years serving in the nursing home and the Missouri Senate. But you know, I want to say thanks to all of you for being involved. You know, it's not everyone that'll get involved in the process. You know, one of the things that we fight all the time is voter apathy. And that's people that just don't care about what goes on. And, you know, I always talk to people that don't vote or don't get involved. And I ask them, you know, have you ever walked through a veteran cemetery and just looked at those white crosses of people that made the ultimate sacrifice that you could just spend 10 minutes of your life going down and voting or getting involved in your government? You know, because those people gave the ultimate sacrifice and gave their lives for this dream that we call America, for the ability to me and everyone here to live the American dream and fulfill those freedoms and opportunities that we have. You know, I remember several years ago when I decided to run for office, there was a gentleman that spoke at our church in our Lincoln days called Mike Huckabee, and he talked about why people need to be involved in office. You know, and he went to Matthew 5:13, the salt and light. You know, it only takes a little bit of salt to flavor a good steak. And that's why good people need to get involved in politics, because we can flavor everything around us by getting out and getting involved. And so, you know, I decided to run for state office, and I remember going over to my neighbor, one of these old gentlemen named Bill, raised mules, trained mules. And I sat down one day and I said, Bill, I'm thinking about running for office. And he looked at me and he says, are you crazy? But you know, I want to thank you for being crazy, because you care about the direction America's going. And without you, you know, we'll be without a direction. And I want to applaud each and one of you that are running or thinking about running and running a campaign. If there's one thing I want to advise, you know, I've been able to run my own campaigns, and I've worked for 6 years trying to win a majority in the Missouri House, is don't be afraid to be different. You know, you people are going to tell you what you need to be doing, but I always found out that gut feeling inside of you that tells you what you need to be doing, you need to follow that. And when you're looking at legislation, you start using your brain, but if it goes against that feeling that you have in your chest of what's right and wrong, you better follow that feeling. That's one of the things that I've tried to follow throughout, because that inner voice inside of you is your core values speaking. And you can think all you want, but when you go against your core values and beliefs, you're headed for a lot of long, sleepless nights. You know, one of the things that Abraham Lincoln said one time, he was asked, what do you want to accomplish in office? And he says, when I want to accomplish one thing, he says, when I leave office, I want to have one friend left, and I want that friend to be inside of me. Because he knew that if you don't make the right decisions, you're going to be miserable. So he was one person that made the decisions and was able to leave office or serve in office as knowing that he had one person, and that was himself, to be true to. And I think he served well in that capacity and was the greatest presidents we ever had. But you know, one of the instances that what a lot of people don't get into campaigns is the stories and the things that aren't accurate that we're told about them. And I want to tell you this story that I always, whenever I see a campaign ad, it always reminds me of this story. And when your opponents come after you and they run ads that are strictly untrue, I want you to think about this story a little bit. But there was a guy that looked in the newspaper, and he saw an ad for sale, talking dog. And he thought, well, you know, this is really amazing, a talking dog. And so he thought surely it's a joke or some kind of mechanical toy. So he called the lady and he says, I'm calling about the ad you had in the paper about a talking dog. And she says, yes, you can come over and talk to him. You know, he was very intrigued, so he says, I'll be right over. So he got the address, and he went in and he knocked on the door, and the lady opens the door up. And he says, I'm here to see about the talking dog. And she says, okay, go on out to the pool. I've got some work to do in the kitchen. You go out and talk to him. So he walks out to the pool, and there's this dog laying on a couch there by the edge of the pool. And he walks up and says, how are you doing? And the dog looks at him and says, I'm doing great. How are you? And he's just amazed that there's a talking dog. First one he'd ever seen. So he sat down, pulled up a chair, and said, do you care if I talk to you for a while? And the dog said, yeah, that'd be fine. We can chat. He says, well, what brings you to this area? And he says, well, the dog said, I come here to retire. He says, I've had a long, eventful life, and I just wanted to get away. So he says, well, the guy says, well, what kind of life have you led? And he says, well, I started out as a seeing eye dog. Worked several years as a seeing eye dog in a seeing eye area. And he says, that kind of got boring to me, so I wanted to join the military. So I joined the military, and I served several tours in Vietnam. And he says, my job was to sniff out bombs and drag soldiers out of the way of enemy fire. And he says, I finally retired from the military, and he said, I got a job as a New York City police dog. And he says, 9/11 happened then, and I was able to go in and save several people from the burning buildings. And he says, I decided I'd just retire and get out of that public life and enjoy myself. And the guy was just amazed. And he run back into the kitchen and says, ma'am, I got to ask, why are you selling this dog? And she looked at him and says, because he's a terrible liar. He didn't do any of those things. He sits there on the couch all day and makes up those stories. But I want you to think about that. But the way that you can overcome them is by being a person of integrity and honor. You know, getting out and talking to people. Because the other side is going to do stuff. They're going to say bad things about you. But when you go out and meet people and you talk to them and you look them in the eye and one-on-one talk to them. I remember Emory Melton, which is a longtime senator from my area, gave me a little bit of advice one time. He says, when you're running for office, do what the other candidates and the people don't expect. He says, they expect you to go to the fair, they expect you to go to events and come up and talk to them. What they don't expect is for you to show up on their doorstep and talk to them one-on-one. That is what wins elections. Is the personal attack, the contact that you had. Then when the personal attacks come, you've cushioned yourself that they don't believe it because they've met you, they've talked to you. And it becomes politics as usual when your opponent starts using negative material. So that's one of the best ways that you can win elections is not thinking too much